Hello, welcome again to Sports Unlocked. As ever, if you hit subscribe, you'll land in your feed automatically to listen to Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from The New York Times, and me, Rob Harris, from Sky News here in very chilly London. Tariq, you're very wrapped up, not like 2 years ago in Qatar, the World Cup.
Yeah, 25 degrees switch. I don't know why we were complaining about Qatar. It's all forgiven. So cold.
This is possibly balmy. You should come up to Yorkshire, guys. This, I've got a very light cardigan on.
And your shorts, Ziegs.
So we were at the Premier League clubs meeting. Not many of them from the clubs wanted to be hanging out in the cold, although there was someone with a van outside that hotel, wasn't there?
Yeah, another one of these stunts, which was with the play on words, Richards Masters, and then the 4 clubs badges underneath. I think the idea is that Richard Masters, who is the chief executive of the Premier League, that he is being controlled by Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal and Spurs. That happened at the last meeting and it's appeared again today.
Tariq did try and have a word with the person in control of the van.
Yeah, bit of a plot twist here. Martyn's mentioned the 4 clubs there. The chap with his heavy Scouse accent there. We asked him who he supported, and he's a Liverpool fan, isn't he, Martyn?
Yes, he is. But he said he didn't know who'd booked the this trailer with this big screen on it. It was a Manchester agency, and he just drove down from Manchester, stayed last night. But it must be quite expensive if you think you have to pay for this van and overnight accommodation, etc.
The reason why he did come was because it was this Premier League meeting discussing many things. Got a lot of announcements to come from it, and anyone expecting their FIFA news, yes, we've got that to come. There's always a Club World Cup update on this pod. But this Premier League meeting started with a discussion on the new financial regulation updates and perhaps caught many unawares because the meeting started about 9 a.m. Within 20-odd minutes, they had a decision. It's all related to the fallout from Manchester City bringing the case against the Premier League over the associated party transaction rules and partially found to be unlawful. So this was the Premier League's comeback, although City did work to try and stop this vote happening at all.
It wasn't much of a discussion either. This was done within about 20 minutes. The item on these changes to the associated party transaction rules went to the top of the agenda, and the Premier League got these measures pushed through with just 4 opposition clubs, which were Manchester City, Newcastle, Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest.
And we understand that only 2 people actually ended up speaking on this matter, and both in favour from Chelsea and from Manchester United. Quite intriguingly, from Manchester United, it was Omar Barada, the chief executive, who this time last year would have been a Manchester City voice at the meetings.
Yeah, that's one surprising thing, but in a way, but he has to do what Manchester United, his new bosses, want him to say, so he's representing them. I think there's more surprise that Chelsea spoke out in favour of the rules because they had lined up with Manchester City previously around these associated party transaction rules, and I think there was a sort of a fear amongst some people that although half of the ownership were keen to go along with the Premier League, the other half might not be. So it seems that Chelsea managed to decide themselves which way to go, and I think that was critically important.
We'll unpack what each of these things are, but can we just go back 4 weeks when we described Man City's case against the Premier League there and what happened afterward as a seismic...
With both claiming victory.
Yeah, we're both claiming victory, but someone said it was a seismic victory for Manchester City, and that looks really hollow today, I must say, because what happened, you've had this, unless there's another legal challenge, we'll see, you've had these rules tweaked, that massive Etihad sponsorship deal and other sponsorship deals, they're still going to be subject to these rules. In terms of anything big or a major victory for Manchester City, sitting here right now as we're recording this, it's quite hard to see that. Guys, in terms of what happened, what did we see?
So what this relates to are the associated party transactions rules and particularly on fair market value. So relating to striking a deal at the value you'd get on the open market if you were Manchester City going to a company in the UAE. Would that airline deal attract a similar value if you were going to Malaysia or the United States? And of course, they were blocked in getting this new Etihad deal over the line. So those rules do stay in place, but some adjustments over things like access to the data bank. So previously, they only got it once the decision had been taken by the Premier League on whether it was at fair market value. Now they'll see earlier on in the process, what are other deals like this worth?
Yeah, I think they certainly, although it wasn't necessarily a seismic victory, I think it was quite an important one. I mean, some of the changes that have been brought in now is that it removes the burden of proof on a club to prove that these related deals are a fair market value. The clubs don't have to prove that anymore. The other thing that they don't have to do is show that it would be fair market value in quotes under normal market conditions. That gives a bit more flexibility, I think, so that if you have a sponsor who can argue that there's a special reason they want to pay a bit more than the usual market value, that might get through. I mean, I think they'd have to make a case for that, and I think you couldn't go have ridiculous sums, but it should provide a bit of flexibility. But that wasn't enough. Manchester City, they tried to block this. They're still claiming it's unlawful. They could still bring another legal challenge. And the other interesting thing was around shareholder loans and the fact that they should now be viewed as an associated party transaction. City didn't like the idea that there was going to be an exemption on shareholder loans going back to December 2021. I think, to me, it makes more sense that you do have an exemption, because you can't sort of punish a club retrospectively for something they didn't know about.
Yeah, I agree with that. But just on your other point, you know, I don't know any other business that might want to pay more for something than they should have. Like a third party, I'm sponsoring, say, Sport Unlocked.
We have no sponsors, just to remind everyone, commercial free at this stage.
If I could get it for 5, why do I want to give you 10? And this is something I've never understood. You can make a case for it only if you are saying you are trying to pump more money into this football team, in this example. From a business point of view, it makes no sense to pay more than you really want to. Why would you?
Well, because if say you're Etihad Airways,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure I get maximum publicity,
Yeah.
and if I give them a bit more than the market value, then they've got a better chance of winning the Champions League, and therefore we get more eyeballs on our product.
Well, why don't they just buy a stake in Manchester City then? Because this is a private investment of His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan. I'm sure if the people at Etihad, who are completely separate from him, want to knock on his door and invest some money in Manchester City, perhaps they could do that.
And just this week, big announcement from New York City FC, part of the City Football Group. They've managed to finally find a naming rights sponsor for their stadium. Let's take any guesses. Do we know who's got it?
Is it Emirates Airlines?
Try again.
Qatar Airways, maybe? Riyadh Air?
It's actually Etihad.
You shocked me, Rob. Stunned.
It will be known as Etihad Park. The New York City statement saying that today's announcement builds on the successful partnership Etihad Airways has built with the City Football Group. So, yeah, no disguising that wide relationship.
No, not at all. But this is the crux of this whole vote, this whole dispute, and I actually think if you look at it from a broader perspective, I think it's quite important that City were sort of lost this fairly significantly. They needed 7 votes, they only got 4. I think this shows that actually there's more of a broader feeling that they don't want to be, other clubs don't want to be bullied. They're a bit fed up with their sort of, the cost, the
huge legal bill.
The huge, we're talking 48 million last year for legal costs. That's 6 times higher than was budgeted. And I think the biggest outlay of that must have been Manchester City.
Also, there was not about the cost. It was just the posture, the tone taken by City after that arbitration, particularly this letter from their chief legal officer, Simon Cliff, which he said, guys, we got this covered. If you really want to know what's happening, we'll dispense free legal advice to you guys, and we'll get this sorted out. And I think that annoyed a lot of clubs in the way that they were kind of being shepherded and told what's what by Simon Cliff at Manchester City.
And of course, some of the correspondence involving Simon Cliff was in the football leaks that came out and could well be part of this ongoing 115 case, which is into 10 weeks it's been going on for across London as well now. That far costlier legal battle the Premier League's involved in against Manchester City.
Yeah, I mean, that should be coming to a conclusion very shortly. We don't know exactly when. And then there's probably going to be a couple of months before the judges on that panel come up with an outcome. Then there's almost certainly to be an appeal. And what happens beyond that? I mean, I think what this legal challenge against the ABT rules show is, could City even challenge the rules under which if they are found to have breached some, could they challenge those rules to say that they were unlawful? I mean, one fears that we're going to be talking about legal challenges for years.
And the bill rises, the lawyers do well out of it. It's a good job the Premier League continues to generate more revenue, and we're told that Premier League clubs received quite an update on the state of play with television rights and commercial deals. The fact is, over the next 3-year cycle, 2025 to 2028, the value of sponsorships and TV deals have gone up from £10.5 billion to £12.5 billion. So that's about a 17% uplift.
Yeah, pretty big. And particularly it's the overseas TV rights which are doing so well. The domestic rights have plateaued a bit, but I think you're getting something like 1.5 billion more from 2025 to 2028 for overseas rights than you did for the current 3-year term. I think the clubs voted on a sort of final deal today, quite a big one for the Asia Pacific region. That's a sort of multi-territory deal. So, and that has confirmed that. And what that also means, actually, it's going to be more money for the top clubs, because any increase in overseas TV income is split according to where you finish in the table. So it could mean something like an extra 29 million for the champions compared to only an extra 11 million for the club that finishes bottom.
So that's really, really good news for the Premier League. But when you think about them in the kind of European neighbourhood, the Premier League is absolutely battering everyone else. And you're looking at this in the context of the chaos in France. So the Premier League with this deal will be 5 to 6 times more than the French clubs get, and 3 to 4 times more than Serie A, which has got those great teams, AC Milan, Inter, Juventus, etc. And it just shows that pressure from the other clubs to do something about the Premier League being so powerful. You can see why it still exists, right?
And you can see why at FIFA they look on enviously about the power of the Premier League with the Club World Cup, however much it's about going global. And you can see why the Premier League has its global ambitions. They focusing on marketing around the world. We've seen the target to the US. Perhaps India is a big market for them too. We've seen the IOC and FIFA going after India, and whether they put the resource into that to really boost the profile of the players and the clubs in that market as well.
Yeah. The thing is, it's impossible to sort of drive up interest. It almost happens organically, doesn't it? And it happens over many, many years. So however you want to sort of push yourselves, and for example, the Bundesliga has got pretty poor overseas TV rights profile and income, and they're desperately trying to do something about it, but you just can't conjure it up.
It's like 15, 20 years Bundesliga trying to go, global. And we've seen even recently, there was a bit of news this week that La Liga, which was hoping to be the first league to play a domestic game overseas, the plan was for Barcelona to play Atletico Madrid on December the 22nd. I think Miami, that's now been mothballed because it's too soon selling tickets and things like that. So that now is going to be pushed back. And I also don't think that's really going to move the needle for any other league. And the Premier League feels like, as long as if we do this in 10 years, it feels like the Premier League will still be dominant in 10 years' time.
La Liga really struggling to get that US deal over the line. They've been trying for so long, haven't they? It started about 5-6 years ago. The various challenges against the FIFA regulations. They thought they had it all in place ready for this December, but have had to abandon it again. And Javier Tebas still there at La Liga. A lot of change in the staff around him. Maybe that impacts him in terms of trying to get these big strategic decisions sorted.
Yeah, I mean, he's a mainstay there. And you think this will eventually happen, because we had the lawsuits in the United States between Relevant and FIFA, which has kind of left the court now. It looks like FIFA will allow permission for these games to go ahead perhaps in a limited way. But again, I just don't think having the odd game played in America is going to change the dynamic of the Premier League being by far the number one, and maybe some new audience for these leagues, but not really.
Well, I think that's at the heart of the issues around the Club World Cup next year in America, because the European Club Association met this week. They had met with FIFA. There were discussions about revenues. But FIFA were unable to give any idea of what the TV income for the tournament will be, because they haven't got a broadcast partner. Apparently, from what I understand, they were quite positive about the sponsorship income, but there's still uncertainty around TV income.
So we've had one sponsor announced, which was Hisense, the number 2 global company in TV.
That was their memorable advert at the Euros in Germany, going around the pitch, number 2 globally. Although it was memorable still.
It was. Maybe with the Club World Cup, they'll be hoping to get that number 1, which I believe is Samsung. Now, the interesting thing there is often when you look at tournaments, the biggest income is TV. But here we're saying sponsorship is going to be bigger. Why are we saying that? It's almost inevitable that these sponsors, or the big ones, are going to be from Saudi Arabia. And we've got the draw for the Club World Cup on the 5th of December, but we've got the draw or the bidding announcement for the World Cups 2030 and 34 a week later on December the 11th. Now, it wouldn't be, beyond the realms of reality here to think that Saudi get the World Cup in 2034 and then the plethora of sponsors for this Club World Cup. Is it cynical? Maybe, but is it likely? Probably, right?
Yeah, maybe if they announced it before the 2034 vote, it would look like some sort of financial arrangement, even though there's no rival bidders for 2034, nor are there for 2030. Something was intriguing. The FIFA announcement this week about the 2026 World Cup, announcing the first ever World Cup hospitality deposit program being launched. And it talks about fans being able to purchase fully refundable deposit vouchers starting at $500 to be first in line when hospitality sales begin in early 2025. It's slightly confusing because they're announcing a deposit program where you don't know how much the tickets are going to cost eventually that you're putting the deposit down for.
Well, probably going to be more than $500.
So don't book any.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is the way things roll over there in the United States, where you have seat licenses and other things. The right to buy tickets for very popular events has existed there for a really long time. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that money will be in a bank account accruing interest until 2026.
I mean, is it normally hospitality is the last thing to sell out, isn't it? I don't quite understand what do you get any other benefits from sort of booking early about this right to buy? Do you get discounts? Or?
I think in terms of corporate, the US is like one of the world's biggest corporate hospitality markets, and for some of those there's a lot of World Cup games, by the way. It's 4018 World Cup, but for those big ones, the demand, I think, will outstrip supply considerably. So maybe they're trying to create some order to that and get some idea of what their demand's going to be like. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen FIFA Pro again this week, dangling the prospects of a player strike next summer. Can't see that happening around the Club World Cup.
Well, Rodri, funny enough, the player who kind of kicked off this debate with his interesting comments about player fatigue and players being overworked and the possibility of a strike. He said this week that he's hoping to be fit in time to appear at the Club World Cup. He, of course, had this cruciate knee injury just after making those comments about players being overworked. But there were some negative comments around the Club World Cup as well from Uli Hoeneß, former president of Bayern Munich, said that they kind of have to do it. It's a bit of an ordeal. This isn't a tournament that they really want to play in. So we're still seeing this kind of push and pull around that tournament.
The FIFA put out an interesting statement on the Club World Cup this week. So Philippe Auclair wrote a long piece about the tournament in The Guardian, and asked about the decision to give Inter Miami the host nation place without previously announcing the criteria. FIFA said in a statement that the vested interest of others afraid of its success means they are actively trying to undermine it by dropping to the disappointing level of challenging whether the winner of a domestic league structure should rightfully qualify or not. Vested interests? Who are they talking about?
That's punchy, isn't it?
It is punchy, but again, it's kind of self-inflicted because it's only because the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, made a big play, and every time they put, this is the most meritocratic tournament, this is only teams that achieve this sort of level of success get to it. They made such a big point of it, and then it's clear for most people to see that they were desperate for Inter Miami to be in this competition. And we've seen comments from Major League Soccer as well, which were showing their frustration, in my opinion, when asked did they have much of a say in who goes into this competition. You'll have to ask FIFA. It just shows they were excluded. There's another really important issue there in North America. It was written in the Times here in London, Martyn's newspaper, about the fact that the Mexican teams are owned by the same company. Now, FIFA's rules state that someone or an entity with an interest in two teams cannot be in the competition. And that now creates a situation where they're going to have to make a decision on this. And then if they do kick one of these Mexican teams out, who takes the place? There is a Costa Rican team that is demanding a place in the competition. But it seems like if you look at the statistics, it should be Philadelphia Union, I think, who would be justified in taking that place.
No comment from FIFA yet on this with the draw approaching. They wouldn't want to be replacing teams at this late stage, would they? Or facing legal challenges that delay the draw. Although, the draw could take place and they could replace the team if necessary, couldn't they?
Yeah, they could easily do that. That sort of thing's happened before in other tournaments. Thinking back to
Denmark, 92.
Exactly, Yugoslavia and Denmark, Euro 92. Well done, Tariq.
So the Club World Cup finishing in mid-July. We now know when the new Premier League season will start. That'll be on August the 16th. It's just 5 weeks after the Club World Cup final. So you could have a scenario where both Chelsea and Manchester City, as the English representatives, are in the Club World Cup final having to start the Premier League 5 weeks later. So that's the time that you need to have a break to rest because they've come straight from the previous season and international matches and then warm up for the new season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably as late as the Premier League can go in terms of a start because they have to finish the season in order to allow a break before the actual World Cup in 2026. They couldn't go any later. But you can.
What do you mean the actual World Cup? Is that what we're now calling the national team one?
Well, yes, not the Club World Cup, the actual World Cup.
Yeah, but what Martyn's saying there as well, this crush on the calendar is clearly there, weirdly created in a way by FIFA with this new event, and it brings us back to the fact that FIFA is still being sued by the leagues, which the Premier League is part of this group, over the calendar. Now, you've just mentioned there's only 5 weeks left. Look, there's only 52 weeks in a year, unless someone can magic up more weeks and more days in a week. It's so constrained, and this is, again, the point is FIFA is the organisation that gets to decide when football is played and what football is played, and this is why they're being sued. There should be a broader consensus on when tournaments are played, how many games, etc., and I think we're going to head there.
The Club World Cup not being in the international calendar, which is the calendar determining when clubs have to release their players for international duty.
Yeah, so I think that's been the big problem for FIFA in this tournament, is that it's got basically plonked in the middle of the summer, and obviously some people are unhappy about it. I mean, Manchester City even asked the Premier League if they could have a delayed start to the new season because they wanted to have time to recover. So, but because it's not part of the calendar, the Premier League refused.
So they've got a good relationship with Man City at the moment in the Premier League.
Yeah. Here's another thing to add to that very packed agenda where they're in difficult waters in trying to navigate some of those club relations. So much of the pod is focused in North America at the moment, and perhaps even more so now we've got Donald Trump putting together his new administration that will be in place for the Club World Cup. And as you call it, what are you calling it? The May World Cup? What was it?
The actual one.
The actual World Cup. That's let's just see the brand for that. Donald Trump certainly does like to spend his time around sport, and he's been at the UFC with Dana White, who's the UFC boss. But a lot of people weren't focused on who was next to him at the UFC last weekend.
No, well, and that was very, very interesting, given the subject was parred over many, many months in the last couple of years. Yasir Al-Rumayyan, the governor of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, the Newcastle chairman, the guy who's leading Live Golf, and Trump, just before his election, if you remember, he said he just needs to get these guys in a room and he'll get it sorted out. And there you are. You have Rumayyan and Trump next to each other at this UFC event.
We did the pod a couple of weeks ago quite in depth on Trump's relationship with sport. We did reference Rory McIlroy believing a deal could be done. Some might have been cynical, but he generally seems to perhaps be interested in golf, given his many vested interests in the sport. And there was with one of the key power brokers, or certainly one of the new key power brokers in terms of Al-Rumayyan.
I mean, I've never had any doubt that Trump has this ability to get some sort of deal done with golf. I suppose the bigger question is it a good thing for golf generally? And does he benefit from it from himself personally?
Well, not at Turnberry, because he actually discovered this week that the British Open won't be going there for the foreseeable future. We heard from the RNA saying we'll not be taking any events there until we're comfortable. The whole dialogue will be about golf. The situation is something we're still not comfortable with at the moment, but that could evolve in the coming years. So it's the RNA not wanting perhaps a load of politics or even Trump to be attending the Open.
Yeah, well, of course, just on the Live Golf, his golf courses have been used for Live Golf tournaments. So, in a sense, financially, he has obviously a vested interest in that. And the reason also why he was at the UFC, a lot of people said, with Dana White and Joe Rogan, the podcaster, a lot of his big supporters were in the crowd there. That UFC fight could have doubled as a rally for a political rally for Donald Trump. And we've seen this sport and Trump link this week with Christian Pulisic, the United States attacker, coming under scrutiny for a goal celebration.
Yes, at the UFC, we already saw one of the fighters doing the YMCA dance that Trump does. I mean, how the YMCA became adopted by Trump is a whole other discussion. And he does that little jig on stage at the rallies. Well, it's been adopted at the UFC and now by Christian Pulisic after scoring for the United States.
And if you look on our separate video channel on YouTube, you'll be obviously Tariq Panja doing the same thing.
Pulisic saying, well, obviously that's the Trump dance. It was just a dance that everyone's doing. He's the one who created it. I just thought it was funny. Is this the sort of softening of Trump in the public consciousness?
It's a caricature, and that. But the weird, he is the most powerful man, or will be when he assumes office in the world. But
because we saw some athletes, footballers, refusing to go to the White House during Trump's first term.
We did. I mean, yeah, he's obviously a really divisive figure. But it made me think: at what point does something like that become a political expression? Because we've seen FIFA and the football authorities, really clamp down on players or officials. There was the story with Robbie Fowler many years ago when he revealed a T-shirt supporting striking Dockers in Liverpool. So when is it political? When is it not? When is it a moment of fun? It's going to be interesting with Trump.
And there was an eagle symbol from Granit Xhaka a few years ago, wasn't it, at the Euros?
No, I think it was at the World Cup, wasn't it? And in Russia. And that has been clamped down on in recent years, but at the time it was allowed.
Yeah, it'd be a fascinating situation, something that might seem innocuous that becomes adopted as a political symbol or is certainly associated with a political figure. It could be provocative in certain scenarios if that was used in a match against Mexico, in Mexico, and there is a Trump clampdown on immigration. It could be something that riled up a crowd and would be overtly political.
No, it could be. I mean, these players are going to have to take that into account when they decide what to do.
Well, the focus will only grow as we build up to the 2026 World Cup. News of one of the stadiums this week, the AT&T Stadium in Dallas. And there was a piece of metal that came loose and fell off onto the field. This was while the roof was opening at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. They did say that there were no injuries and it's being reviewed. Something that struck me about this, a lot of people, of course, calling it an NFL stadium, forgetting it's a World Cup stadium. If this had happened, I'm sure in Brazil ahead of 2014, ahead of South Africa 2010, even ahead of Qatar 2022 and others. Would be calling it a World Cup stadium. As far as I know, FIFA got no inquiries at all.
Well, no, I don't think so. But for our very, very accurate American listeners, obviously it's in Arlington, just outside Dallas, the stadium. But
FIFA are calling it New Jersey, New York, aren't they, for the New Jersey Stadium? So it's a bit of blurring of geography around this World Cup.
Yeah, we're calling it the Arlington Dallas Stadium. But, I mean, this was the stadium that came very close to actually being chosen to host the final before they went to New York / New Jersey.
It's actually an incredible stadium. Before this roof issue, it's one of the most modern stadiums on the planet. Jerry Jones, the owner, has spent. It's one of the most expensive as well. And most recently, it hosted the crossover, that Netflix fight featuring Mike Tyson and the influencer that drew a lot of audiences. And people are saying that's the future of sport. Maybe someone was so upset with what they watched. This old man getting battered by this guy and all the controversy, went on that roof and started throwing tiles, guys.
Don't pretend you don't know what his name is. Jake Paul.
I was wondering if it's a deliberate stance where you're just calling him the influencer.
I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of these people, and good luck to them. He's made a lot of money. We were with people this week, which I found quite interesting, and it was a real hot debate about whether this constitutes sport, whether this is the future of sport, whether this is good for boxing. But I must say, from my point of view, the sight of a 27-year-old person who's very fit and clearly trained for this, up against an elderly man with a knee brace. I know whatever Mike Tyson might have done in the past in his boxing career, this was really quite grotesque to watch.
How old is he?
Mike Tyson?
Yeah.
58 years old.
How old am I?
Vince, can I just, for the record, apologise to you? To be fair...
He's not an elderly man.
He looked... Life has taken its toll on Mike Tyson in a way it hasn't on lithe Martyn Ziegler here, who could go 12 rounds with anyone. All right, fair enough.
Drifting very much into ageism there. That's shocking. So who would you get into the ring with? Who would be the pay-per-view from the world of sports business, sports politics that Tariq could get you in the ring with? Or who would want to watch you in the ring with? I can think of a name.
I think a fair few people would like to see me get absolutely battered. So, yeah. No, but it just as a concept, Mark, what do you think in terms of these fights? Is this the future of sport and boxing?
You're trying to rescue yourself there to claw us back into the discussion now. Digging out of a hole.
Sorry, I'm just losing my brain cells. I can't even comment on that.
Yeah. Martin's going to have to go down for a nap, according to Tariq there.
I was digging the ribs there.
What a way to end this on. Well, hopefully reunited. Send your thoughts as ever. Message us at Sport Unlocked on Blue Sky, X, Facebook, Instagram. Probably another platform I've forgotten that we're on. Or email us sportunlockedpod@gmail.com. But for now, thank you for listening as ever. Goodbye for now.